Hi ho, everybody. My name's Fido Kennington, and I'm welcoming you to the fifth episode of Hey Man, Nice Kiss Shirt. Every week, we get into this rock and roll all night and journal every day. A year long guide to celebrating the fun of being a Kiss fan. If you don't have this book, I urge you to get it. Go to Amazon. It's all for you, Demon. Put a lot of work into this. If you want to know what being a Kiss fan's all about, it's that dude. Thank you, Rick. So let's get into it. Right off the bat, well, you'll see that we don't have the tablecloth this week. She's been retired for the time being. We're going to wait. Maybe we get another autograph and she goes back up and we talk about it. But for now, it's Kiss Army, baby. So let's get into it. January 29th. Rick asks, as a Kiss collector, do you purchase autographed items? Do you feel that a Kiss autograph takes away from a piece of memorabilia? In your opinion, what are the pros and cons of having a member of Kiss sign a piece of merch? And I wrote, I don't seek out autographs or autographed items, but if I find a good deal that just happens to be signed, I'm on it. As far as I'm concerned, the only con to getting an autograph is if it's personalized and you're trying to sell it to somebody that doesn't have your name. It's for me, it's not a big deal. I knock on wood, I plan on keeping all of my autographed stuff. I like to keep all my Kiss merch. I love it. But recently I've seen greedy assholes abusing the privilege of meeting one of our guys by pushing the limit of autographed items. You know, you may have been in line behind somebody that's got the absolute max. You know they're just going to resell it. We don't like resellers around here. You know, they're not appreciating the interaction with my heroes. They just kind of cheapen the whole vibe, you know, puts a bad taste in my mouth. January 30th. What album in the Kiss catalog is a total Snoozefest for you? List your reasoning below, track by track. Well, for me, none of the Kiss albums fit that description. Even my least favorites have at least one song I like on them. For years, Crazy Nights was the bottom of the barrel. I've certainly grown to like it more now, but I hated My Way when it came out. And I still believe that the only thing that identifies that song as a Kiss song is Paul's vocal. And on that album, it really shines on I'll Fight Hell to Hold You. He could sing the phone book in the late 80s. Hot in the Shade had Love Me to Hate You. The acrobatic. Paul's just great on that. His vocal acrobatics that's why I love Paul. I mean, plenty of reason to love Paul, but so, you know, that's what I can say about my least favorite Kiss album. It's got I'll Fight Hell to Hold You on it. With the very notable exception of Revenge, the late 80s, early 90s found Kiss at their most trend-chasingest. While the songwriting often faltered, as I said, Paul's pipes did not. And that was enough to keep me engaged through that era, as well as shirts like this. Funny thing, if you turn this shirt inside out, Paul's face looks more like Paul than it does from the outside. And I mean, say what you will about the trend chasing and the overproduction, the slickness. That live show, I mean, they were ripping. I mean, the energy was great. Crazy Nights was a fun tour, I must admit. Moving on to January 31st. What age do you wish you were when the first Kiss record was released in 1974? Or are you glad you discovered the band at the age and time you did? I wrote, I guess it's a little bit of both. The fact that I was only 3 in 74 meant that I was still young enough to be frightened and enthralled by what I saw on my Douglas show. The idea of they're not just a rock group, they're superheroes. That's extremely potent when you're a little kid with a big imagination. But probably couldn't have entertained that, had I been a teenager when that record came out. So, I mean, it's impossible to say how I would have responded. But I would have loved to have been 16 at that time. And I had a driver's license and a car when they came here to Flint a half a dozen times, starting in 74. Obviously, Michigan was a popular tour stop, and they came here enough that I could have seen them like 30 plus times here in Michigan before seeing them when I actually did in 79. So, yeah, I mean, all things being equal, man, it would have been great to see those early Michigan shows. Any early Kiss show would have just been mind-blowing. February 1st, what is the most impressive feat Kiss has ever accomplished? As long as we're on the subject of Michigan, this is where I'm too biased to give any other answer. Tiger Stadium selling out in 47 minutes. Now, I'm going to resist the temptation to get into the whole blow-by-blow of the experience of that. But, I mean, talk about feeling like a kid again. Those of you who were at the last two shows at Madison Square Garden will attest that the vibe around Manhattan, especially around MSG, was great. I mean, you'd see, a total stranger in a Kiss t-shirt, and it was great. Okay, so picture that, for those of you who weren't at Tiger Stadium, picture like all of that excitement over those couple of days in Manhattan last December, just like crammed into like, a 5-block radius. And it was just fever pitch. I mean, people were losing their minds. My guitarist and my bassist and a couple friends. He worked for a sign company at the time and had Kiss decals plastered on both sides of the van. So like all the way down, people were like, flagging us on the expressway and putting down their windows and hooting and hollering at us. And I mean, it was a whole, we probably got there about noon, and it was just, I mean, it was insane. Like, we ran into Sebastian Bach, and it was just like talking. We were all 8-year-olds that day. It was just insane. Like I said, I should probably just devote an entire episode, have a guest, and talk about how mind-blowing Tiger Stadium was. But yeah, I'd call that a pretty impressive feat. Coincidentally, that was also the day that, I don't know if the press conference was the day before, but MTV News announced that Van Halen was reuniting with David Lee Roth, and, just happened to be in a bar, partying it up with some Kiss fans. And it was just like, do we need another reason to lose our fucking minds right now? Yeah, that was a magical day. Magical day. February 2nd asks, are you a fan of other artists covering Kiss songs? What is your all-time favorite Kiss cover and who covered the song? What makes your choice better than the original version? Okay, so I'm going to kind of answer this question in reverse. None of these versions are better than the original. They're just different, and it's been established. I'm one of those different guys. That's why I love The Elder. Um, I like when bands like take chances with something, and uh, again in reverse. I know this album takes a little bit of shit here and there from fans, but Kiss My Ass, classic Kiss regrooved. Um, I really liked a lot of the tunes on that. Standouts, Calling Dr. Love by Shandy's Addiction, which was, like I think Tom Morello, Maynard from Tool. Can't remember if Billy Gould from Faith No More was on that. Anyway, nice little super group doing a weird quasi-industrial version of Calling Dr. Love. But my favorite on that record is Rock and Roll All Night by Toad the Wet Sprocket. And it's just kind of a 6/8 folky ballad version of Rock and Roll All Night. And I remember the first time I heard it, I laughed out loud. I was just like, they're really taking it out there, I don't know, something really appeals to me about that song. If you haven't heard Toad the Wet Sprocket's version of Rock and Roll All Night, do yourself a favor. It's fun stuff. Like I said, not better than Rock and Roll All Night. Love Rock and Roll All Night. Love the tambourine. I love that production on Dress to Kill. The live version, of course, amazing. Played the shit out of that on Detroit radio, so I grew up hearing that. But that said, I'm more of a shout it out loud guy. I consider that, Kiss's anthem. For me, that was the one. But yeah, cover's good. And there's others too. I mean, Melvin's version of Going Blind. Chemical People did a version of Getaway that was pretty cool. But yeah, check those out for yourselves. February 3rd, happy birthday, Neil Bogart. Okay, this one, I'll admit, I should have done a little bit more prep on this, a little bit more research. Maybe I should have gone back and reread parts of Party Every Day, Larry Harris's book about Casablanca. I'd still want to see Spinning Gold. I haven't seen the film. If any of you have seen it, sound off in the comments. Always encouraging you guys to get in the comments and mix it up with these questions. Nobody has really answered any of my Kisstory exam questions from last week. So go on back to episode 4 and get into that. Like I said, if you can answer the real stumper I gave you, I'll have you on the pod. You'll make tens of dollars and garner the adoration of a dozen people. So anyway, February 3rd. Had Casablanca not been so genre-focused with disco and signed more rock and roll or heavy metal acts, in your opinion, would the record company have lasted longer into the 80s than it did? Why or why not? While I think they would have been more successful. I think diversifying your roster is a smart idea when you're as established a label as Casablanca. Um, but a couple of factors, and again, I could be, speaking out of ignorance here. If anybody wants to put a finer point on these aspects, sound off in the comments. Um, but as much as Casablanca owes its success to Neil Bogart, I think I think he contributed. I don't want to say equally, but uh, his uh, ability to like waste money uh, contributed probably to the relatively short life of the label. Um, I'm sure. I'm trying to think of like if any of like a coin's uh, acts, if things had been different with Glickman Marks and it's really hard to say. Even Neil's untimely death was probably a factor in the longevity of the label. But yeah, I think we all kind of wish that they would have branched out a little bit more, uh, and probably would have had a little bit more success. February 4th. This is our last question for the week. Rick asked, name every Kiss album that would have been better with a different producer. Bonus, name the producer of the newly visioned album. So, I don't have a lot of quibbles. I don't, I'm not trying to like reinvent the wheel with every single album. But with the first album, anyone who's heard the demos would probably agree that Eddie Kramer should have helmed that. Um, Hotter Than Hell. Is it unfair to choose Eddie Kramer in every case? Maybe so. Um, I don't think it would suck if he had just been there. If he had been George Martin to Kiss, or yeah, if he had been to Kiss what George Martin was to the Beatles, you know what I mean. Um, you never know, but he definitely knew how to wrangle those boys sonically. Um, the next bunch of albums, I'm happy. I'm happy. Eddie is represented a couple more times, obviously, but so from Hotter Than Hell to Unmasked, I would have loved to hear Roy Thomas Baker produce Unmasked. Uh, the way he finessed, especially the second Cars record, Candy-O. That's a top 10 record for me. I love Candy-O. I love the first album. I believe it was Jeff Workman was his engineer. He could have toughened up Unmasked a bit. Music from The Elder, Todd Rundgren. Todd has a way of conceptualizing his own unique way, whether it's his records. Another one of my top 10 albums is Skylarking by XTC. Much has been made about the contentious relationship between Andy Partridge and Todd while they were making the record, but you can't argue with the results. Skylarking is, I consider it a concept album. So yeah, I think conceptually, uh, I think he would have reined them in on The Elder in a way that Ezrin didn't. Animalize is probably the next record. I don't hate the production, but it's a little thin in spots. I would have loved to hear Michael Wagoner do Animalize. He really brought the heavy to Constrictor, and Raise Your Fist and Yell for Alice Cooper. Of course, Accept, Balls to the Wall. But especially like Raise Your Fist and Yell. I love the way that album's produced. Crazy Nights. Ted Templeman. It would have been great to hear. Well, I don't, I'm not trying to, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to like, inject any like Alex Van Halen drums into Crazy Nights or whatever, but I think that's a record that like would have been toughened up. I mean, do you see a pattern here with Unmasked, Animalized, and Crazy Nights? I I think we'd all like those albums just a little bit heavier. Oh, by the way, I want to give a shout out to Frankenstein. His reimagining of "I Was Made for Loving You" from about a month back or whatever. Really nice job on that. Really nice job on that. You should check it out. Frankenstein Creations on YouTube. Hot in the Shade, Jack Douglas. Again, I think Jack would have done some reining in. His work with Aerosmith, The Proof's in the Pudding. I think he could have. I think he could have trimmed some of the fat on that record. I think Hot in the Shade got it's a little self-indulgent. Gene and Paul kind of left to their own devices. I'm also a huge Cheap Trick fan. Yeah, Jack Douglas would have been a good producer for Hot in the Shade. Psycho Circus. I'm gonna go way out into left field and suggest a Rick Rubin production on Psycho Circus. He was really hitting his stride by that time. You know, he'd worked obviously, I mean, with so many folks, but I love the presence. I love the in-your-faceness. I think the team of Rick Rubin and Andy Wallace mixing. Electric by The Cult is an amazing example of what those two can do together. Psycho Circus was kind of a bloated record. You know, too big. I don't know if overproduced is necessarily an accurate term, but I think Rick Rubin really could have stripped it down and made it cool, and I think his approach might have, like, if it was even possible to unify those four original members at this point in history, I think Rick could have got something really interesting happening with Psycho Circus. And finally, well, I'm skipping Sonic Boom because I dig it. I think it's really underrated as a Kiss album, sonically. So skipping ahead to Monster, let's take it back to the beginning with Eddie Kramer. I think I would have liked to hear a little bit, Greg Collins and Paul Stanley having produced both Sonic Boom and Monster. There is somewhat of a sameness there. I think a reunion with Eddie Kramer would have been great for what evidently going to be Kiss's last record. That takes us to the end of week 5. From Rock and Roll All Night and Journal Every Day. Available on Amazon. It's All For You, Demon. Compiled a fantastic book. Get your hands on it. This is your pal Fido signing off for now. Reminding you to put your two lips together and kiss that subscribe button. And remember, play hard, play fair, nobody hurt.